Hey there, it is Tom Stern on behalf of Indie Structural Productions once again, and this time we're gonna be doing some guitar maintenance. So we're gonna be taking this Charvel and doing some work on it. There's a couple of things that need doing. I've made a maintenance 101 kind of video before, so I don't really need to go do a similar type of video, which is really funny because the previous one I did was an Ibanez 7-string that was also red, that also had a maple veneer on top, but yeah, coincidence. So first off, let's go have a look at how this sounds, or more so, let's go have a listen to how this sounds. So, first of all, let's have a look through all the electronics. At least there's a sound. The volume works. Both work, and I've already checked the intonation that works as well. So it's not a bad sounding guitar, but we're gonna switch from the delicate clean over to, I guess, future chug machine. And see how this handles some rhythm tones, some distorted tones. Yeah, the pickup is really close, or the bridge pickup is really close to the strings. The neck does need a bit of an angle onto it, so I'm gonna need to put in a shim because the strings are really far away from the fretboard on the top end of the strings here. But it doesn't sound bad. It's really not half bad. Gonna try articulate lead. Yeah, I don't know. It is what it is. But at least everything works, so that's nice. I do need to do something to do this knob. It is extremely sticky and stiff. So clean it up, put a shim in, make a new nut, because this one's broken, and fix that knob a bit, so that tone knob. And then just a cleanup, polish the frets, clean the fretboard, and that should be it, really. Let's see how it goes. All right, well, now we've figured out a couple of things that we need to do, and I'm gonna show you some close-ups so you get what I mean. So starting off, need to do something about the neck angle, because the strings are fairly high up, but the bridge is all the way down. So just to get a little bit more adjustment on the bridge, we need to bring that angle up just a little bit. So I'm gonna make a shim for the back of the neck. Seems like there's a lot of cleaning to do because this is very dirty and grimy. I mean, look at the fretboard. So yeah, gonna oil the fretboard, polish up the frets so they look real nice. Then there's this thing. So the nut is this cheap plastic and needs replacing because it's also broken and currently just glued in place. So that needs work. I'm not going to do anything to the back of the headstock, back of the neck. I'll show you what I mean by that, because right around here Let's see if I can focus on that. So you might be able to make out that there's a crack right there. Now what that is bring the microphone closer. Now what that is the truss rod cavity has gone too deep right here. It's cracked a little bit. It's pretty much veneer thin right at that point, but there's not much I can do about that. This is a rather cheap Chinese Charvel. There's a couple of things I already noticed about it. Yeah, the neck is one thing, but first off, this is not a maple cap. Of course, it is a veneer, and you can tell because, let's see if I can get some light in there. I'll try and come around on the other side. All right, so that end grain right there, so right there, that's mahogany end grain. So it's a mahogany body with mahogany top and a maple veneer on top. And the binding is just plastic cream binding, but it's not even scraped clean properly. It's not even properly scraped clean because you can see parts where, right here, where it's colored, they've forgotten to take off the paint on the binding, or the stain from the binding. So they've scraped it, but they haven't scraped the whole lot. And that goes through pretty much all over the guitar. You can see it good. You can see it pretty well here. There. So there's the transition between the veneer and the binding. That black line. That's what they should have scraped the binding to, but haven't managed to do that. So, yeah. It's a minor detail, but these are kind of things that I notice about guitars. Also the headstock. As you can see, the paint job there is not the greatest. But overall, this is not the worst cheap guitar that I've had to work on. Not by a long shot. So there's still hope for it. Gonna adjust this knob because it is fairly stiff in comparison to the rest. So I'm gonna have a look at what's going on. I think it's rubbing against the top there. That's why it's not really moving. We are going to be using the Diagnosing spray cleaner to clean up most of the gunk. Fretboard restorative for the fretboard. Crimson Guitars fretboard restorative. Crimson Guitars fret polishing abrasive rubbers. Hosco nut files. And yeah, I think that should pretty much do it. It's just setup, really. So first things first, we're gonna get off the strings. Now, these are fairly new strings, so I don't actually need to put in new ones. Just keep these old ones. As a matter of fact, it was asked of me to keep. One thing I forgot to film is I've already gone through and checked that each fret plays really well. The neck itself is flat. There's a little bit of a dip toward the end, so it's dipping right around here. It's dipping down. But at least playability-wise, it didn't affect matters at all. Now, of course, your life would be so much easier if you just put in new strings, but seeing as we don't have those, and I was told to keep the old strings, then we shall do just that. I would go and get new strings for this otherwise, but I don't know the gauge, and I also don't have time. There's a deadline for this guitar. The main issue is getting it to play properly. Okay, just remove the bridge. I might give that a little shining up later on. Wow, this is a really, really low quality bridge. Let's see if we can, yeah, this bridge hasn't been machined out all that well. But it is what it is. Now, one of the very first things that we're going to do is we're going to take that nut off. And to do that, just grab yourself a flathead screwdriver and a mallet. A couple of quick tap, or a couple of small taps will just do. And should come loose. Like so. There's a very easy way of testing good quality nuts, and that's just dropping it on your work surface. And you can hear that that didn't sound like anything. That is just a plastic, really crap sounding nut. Usually bone nuts and whatnot, they'll have a sort of ring to it. So, but yeah, that's pretty dull. Yeah, gonna get rid of that and put in the new one. But first I need to wait for the new one to come in. Might as well get to cleaning. Alrighty, so time to make a shim. Now, I guess the easiest way to do that would just be to, page 7. I'm not going to do anything too drastic. It doesn't need to be that big. At first I thought of veneer, but that might end up being a little bit too thick, really. So I'm just going to do it out of this card material. Very stiff, very rigid, and as somebody reminded me of this, looking at like old Fender guitars and stuff like that, when luthiers used to use their own business cards as shims. This is not all that far off. Take it down a little bit. Now the reason why you'd use a shim is to raise the angle of the neck ever so slightly so that you have more adjustment on your bridge. Now, previously, I was hitting pretty far off. I'm just going to show you the difference a small shim makes. Now, I took the shim away, and with a straight edge, you can check the angle of your neck. And as you can see right here, there is not enough angle. So now that I put the strings on top of the bridge here, the strings will be really, really high because I need to take into account, well, action, so that you can actually play the damn thing. You want to have, well, depending on your preference and depending on the sort of tone that you're going for. But usually I start off with the base of the string, so that's the bottom of the string, being 1.5, maybe like 1.2 millimeters off the fret. So as it currently stands, I would actually need to put in quite a big gap in order to have the nut be accurate. Now that's, let's see, that would be the string. That's like 2 millimeters or so with zero possibility to actually adjust the bridge. Because as you can see, it's all the way down. Well, I mean, there's still, yep, there was maybe a 1/16 of rotation on there. Yeah, it's basically all the way down. You want to have a little bit of leeway so you can actually bring the bridge up if need be. But now, if you bring the bridge up from this position, your string height is going to be ridiculous. So let's fix that with a shim. Okay, now we've added the shim that I showed you earlier from just the same card material. And already we're starting to get a little bit more of a better result. It's still not ideal, so I might actually look into putting that tiny bit of veneer because it's just not quite there yet. So let's see how drastic it would be if I put in a veneer instead of the card. All right, so now I've made this little piece of veneer that I'm going to use on my shim. I put an ever so slight angle on it so it'll theoretically match the angle of the neck. Let's have a look at how it works. All right, and now, as you can see, I'm a little bit higher, but with a couple of turns on the bridge here, raising it up, now I have a little bit more room to adjust. As you can see there is actually just ever so slightly got the bridge higher, so now I have room to adjust. I can put it down, I can get the strings a bit lower, I can get the strings a bit higher. Now there is adjustment. which is kind of what you want. I'm still gonna see whether I need to go back and adjust that a little bit, the shim I mean, and whether the angle now is too steep, but little finesse and we'll get there. All right, so next up we have the brand new nut that we need to get adjusted. I'm just gonna take that off because it seems like it's coming off the edge a little bit and leaving off the truss rod cover as it is, just for the time being if I need to go back and adjust the truss rod at any point. So it's not quite reaching the bottom here. So having a look, there's actually a little bit of glue left over from the previous nut. So what I'm gonna do is ever so slightly, there's a high spot right there where the glue has cured. So I need to remove that in order for this new nut to kind of sit in place properly. Now, being very careful to not take away any of the wood because I don't want to change the actual flat surface here. I'm also having a little issue here where the bottom of the nut is angled a bit steeper than I'd like it to be. I need that to be flat, but now it's at quite a steep angle. So first I need to make sure that I have enough nut to work with. So I'm using a half-cut pencil that's sitting on the top of the frets, and that'll kind of give the depth of my nut slots. So there. I don't have that much to work with actually. So that kind of sucks that it has a curved bottom because now there's a slight gap. If I just put it on there like this. This was supposed to be just a blank that was squared off and everything else, but it's a little bit more shaped than I would have liked it to be. So I need to figure out what to do here because I can't take away that much material. I'll show you what I mean. There. Wonder if you can see that, but there's actually quite a bit that needs taking off, but I don't have that much to really take off because I need about that much height for the string slots. All right, well, this turned out to be a bit trickier. I'll see what I can do. Okay, so what I am gonna do is I'm gonna use some binding material that I have. So this is some binding material which just happens to be the same thickness as the nut itself. So I got lucky. As much as I wouldn't want to use this, I could use the same veneer that I have as a shim, but quite frankly, it wouldn't look right because instead, if I use this piece of black binding material, it will blend in to the black headstock very well, and it'll actually look rather nice on the side as well. It'll blend in a lot better, it'll be a little bit more uniform, so I'm gonna go with that. Now I'm really wishing that I had some accelerant, but seeing as I don't, we'll just have to wait it out. Or another way of doing it is having something that you know is square up against your fret leveling beam, and then using that as a guide to take away material that way. And this is actually proving to be a lot faster, a lot quicker, so I think I'm going to do it like this until I have what I want. Alright, now I've gone and checked that it's nice and flat, which is great. And now what I need to do is get it cut down to size. Now, as you can see, it's widening out quite a bit, and I checked that I need to take that much off, and basically, by the looks of it, this is completely straight. So it's pretty much a rectangle. So all I need to do is just flatten it out according to this line. So like so, just using a file and then rounding off all the sharp edges. And yeah, then we'll move on to the next bit. First, though, I need to get rid of my old lines so I know what I'm working with here. So the next step is, so I just need to use the half cut pencil here on top of the frets just to mark out the depth of my knot slots. So there, now I have a lot more to work with now that I've added a little bit of material to the bottom here. Yeah, moving on to the next bit, which is shaping the nut and getting it roughly cut down to size. That means lots of filing. All right, so now we just gotta make sure that we get, because now this has an angle to it, so we're just gonna flatten that out according to what I marked out earlier. So using a, I was gonna say single cut file. Oh, there we go. So using a single cut file just to get this nicely trimmed down. Now if there was more to take off, I would use a saw, but there's not that much material. There we go. I made quick work of it. I made it up until the line that I needed to get. There we go. Looking good. Turns out the leveling beam was a sure way to get this done. Need to take off just a little bit on this side. So yeah, it's all a matter of just going back and forth and checking with your neck until you have a comfortable fit. Because if you have a little bit of a lip coming off the side of the neck, it's not going to feel that comfortable to play because you're going to hit your finger on it constantly. I feel pretty happy with how that feels. So now we got the curve going in it, right? Well, it's a little bit deeper than we need it to. So we're just going to take this, we're just going to take the top of the nut down ever so slightly. Following the radius. Just so that we don't need to make our actual slots too deep. Because if they're really deep, then there's a chance that your strings will get caught a little bit more. But of course, if they're too shallow, your strings are just gonna pop out, which is also not ideal. I think that's pretty good. Just do a little bit of shaping. Now, on the very back end of your nut, you want to keep a good edge on it because that is your intonation point. So all I'm doing is just ever so slightly rounding off this edge so that it's not that sharp, because you want your nut to feel comfortable as you're playing. So just a little bit of 240 to make that a little more comfortable. All right, now to knock off all those hard edges. Except before I do that, it is time to mark the actual string slots. So the way I do that is I take a protractor and I mark 3.5 mil off the bass side. So that will be my low E. And then I do 3 millimeters on the treble side. So that's my high E. Like so. Then, using a nut slotting rule, I've marked out where my positions are. Now, more often than not, it seems to land over here. So bring that down a little bit more, a little bit more. Now this type of ruler is extremely handy because it compensates for, okay, so the string gauges. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Great. Now to reinforce those lines, there. So now I have the positions marked out so I can get to filing. Now I'm gonna use, actually, you know what? I'm gonna check some string gauges because I was told to do these a little bit bigger than what they were. So I think I'm gonna go with the 10 to 46. That's most commonly what I use a lot of the time. I use the NYXL 10 to 46s, and we're gonna go ahead and do this accordingly. So I need a 10, 13, 10, 13, then I need a 17, which I believe there is none of in this set. So the closest is 24. Then I need a 26. Closest is 28. Then I need a 36, which I have. And then I need a 46, which I have. All right, so these are now the files that I will use to get the slot depth. Now at first I'm going to start every cut with the 10, because that is going to give me a good place to kind of start all the rest of these slots. I've already marked everything out with a scalpel. So I have a good line to follow. Now, basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm following the sort of angle of the headstock with my file here. And that's just because my intonation point is at the very back of the nut. And if I have the slot just level, the intonation point could be anywhere along that line. But if I angle it, that always means that the highest part, so the intonation point, is where I need it to be, which is at the very back of the nut. And I'm going to bring these down to right around where I've marked out the fret height. And then after that, once I install the nut, once I've shaped it, during the setup phase, I'm going to adjust so that it is bang on the way it should be. I'll show you how to do that when we get to it. So let's start all of these off. So I have my lines to follow. Now, working with bone, you need to be really careful because if your file gets caught and you pull too hard, you might snap or chip the nut ever so slightly. Now, I tend not to do the remainder of the tens not as deep. I just make basically the starting cut to follow along, because if I make them too deep, the other files might get stuck in the slot ever so slightly, and that would be rather annoying. All right. So the B. Once again, I'm not really pushing down, or I should say that I'm not really pushing down at all. I'm just letting the file kind of do the work, just so that I don't impart too much pressure to make this thing chip in any way. A little bit of resistance there. Why am I doing it so low? I can actually bring this up. Like I said, I'm not doing them all the way to full depth just yet, because I want to have a little room for adjustment. And I'm using my finger here as a little bit of a guide to make sure that I'm staying square. I have to admit that I do like the tune-o-matic files because they taper out. So that means that if you're making deeper slots like this, your file won't actually get stuck at all, as I'm doing right now, getting a little bit stuck. Now sometimes, if I'm doing particularly deeper slots, I might go back to the previous and just give a couple of swipes just to open up the top of the previous one, just to make sure that the string sits in pretty well. And this is literally just a couple of swipes, because I don't want to change the width of the slot that I've just made. Then 28. This is pretty boring to watch, so I'm just going to come back once I've done all of them. Alright, now we've got this roughly cut down. As you can see, I'm not all the way at the line just yet. I'm just going to do that at the very end. So let's do some shaping, because right now all the edges are very, very sharp, and that's not extremely comfortable when you're trying to play something. So let's make this a comfortable nut. Alright, so one of the first things that I notice on other guitars is how the nut is made, because that usually gives you a pretty good indication to the quality of the instrument. If attention to detail, or if attention has been put into making a really good nut, then more times than not, the actual product itself should be a fairly good quality instrument. Now, while I'm sanding down this edge on the back of the nut, I'm not going all the way down to the bottom of my nut slots right now, because that would change the intonation point, and that is not something I want to do. So just kind of cleaning it up, making it a bit comfortable, a bit more comfortable. So now doing the edges, again with my file here, and just getting rid of all those sharp corners and edges. All right, I think it's about time to get this attached and do the final setup. Just cleaning up some of the edges here from the binding shim that we made so they don't protrude at all. Then cleaning up the back of this because we don't want to have pencil lines all over the place. Now, placing or not, you only need a couple of drops of super glue. Because essentially, the strings are what hold the nut in place. A couple of drops is all you need. So there. And there should do just fine to have your nut properly seated. Ever so slightly proud on this side. All right, let's get the strings on and start adjusting. Let's go ahead and start with some Diagnosing spray cleaner, because this fretboard looks mingin'. I've not used this before, and it's not really. It's not that bad. It's really weird. It all smells cinnamony. Strange. Really strange. Alright, now with the fretboard nicely cleaned up, we're going to use some Drums and Guitars fretboard restorative. I've made videos on this before, so go check that out. Alright, gonna let that sit for a bit and then remove the excess. Good morning. Hi. Now. Go. Alright, now because these are not new strings, this might be a bit of a pain. Usually, I like to bring them around twice and then pull them through, just to make sure. It's always the most annoying part when you prick yourself with a string, usually the high E. Annoying. Alright, so I'm bringing the bridge up enough at this point so that I can adjust the nut slots. To say that this is annoying is somewhat of an understatement. Now what I'm doing here is I'm pushing the string so that it goes right here. I'm pushing the string under the first revolution, the first rotation, so that it will then push the previous rotations up, kind of locking in the end of the string there. Okay, I couldn't quite get another rotation in there, so I'll do it this way. I think that the slots that I have are not big enough for this gauge of string. Now I didn't check what strings this had coming in, but looks like I will need to make those a bit bigger, because these lower strings are definitely thicker than the 10 to 46 set that I have now put on this. So what did I have? I had 46, 36, and 28. Maybe I will go for 56, 46, and 32. Yeah, I'll have a look at that as an alternative, because this does feel more like a 56 than it does a 46, if I'm honest with you. Sounds beautiful. All right. Moving on. Let's get these more or less to the right depth, or more or less to the right dimension now. All right, that sits already much better. Likewise with that. All right, I'm gonna bring this up to tension, and then we're gonna do adjustments. All right, now to adjust the nut slots, what you want to have is if you fret the 3rd fret and then you press down on the 1st, basically you shouldn't be getting too much resistance. It should be just as easy to fret any other fret than it should be the 1st. Now, as you can see, this is extremely high. I need to press down quite a lot until I'm actually able to press the fret down. So I need to take that nut slot down quite a bit in order to bring that down to about there, where it just needs a little bit of a tap to get it to fret the 1st fret. Now, all of these are actually rather high. So I got a good bit of work to do. I can't work on it at this height because, well, in order to demonstrate that, I'm working at this height. It's basically, you know, at chest height. I can't work like this, so I need to bring it down to about here, or maybe even a little lower. Just a little lower, yeah. And then get to work on it. Now I just need to arrange my files again. So this is the set that I ended up using. 10 to 56, basically. All right, so I'm gonna get to adjusting and we'll be back once I'm done. All right, well, I got that nut now adjusted and I've strung it up, or I've tensioned all the strings up, and now we're actually good to move on to the next phase and the final phase, which is setup and intonation. And then we have this thing playing like it should. By the looks of it, the action is now pretty good. So I'll intonate it, and yeah, then let's see how it works out. One thing I am going to change though is the height of the pickups, because as you recall, the height of the neck pickup was extremely low in comparison to the bridge pickup, which was really, really high. Now the way that I usually set this is I fret the last fret, and then from the pull piece I have about 1.5 mils. And of course this is personal preference. 1.5 mils for some might be way too close, but that's usually what I start with, and then I adjust if need be. Now I can finally afford to bring this pickup ever so slightly up, and it should be pretty good. Let's move on to intonation. Now, when it comes to intonation, you should never intonate with the guitar lying down like this. You should always intonate it from a playing position. Now, I can't get a jack in there, so I'm gonna go and sit down by the computer and do setup that way. All right, so last but not least, it's time to intonate. So, like I said earlier, this is something that you can't really do from the position of working on your bench. You do need to do this from a playing position. So, what would help is if I had the right tool for the job. So I need a flathead screwdriver to bring the saddles back and forth. So basically the way that you want to set it up is that your open string is, now in this instance, an E, and then your 12th fret is an octave of that E. And you just do the same thing with each string. It's a little sharp. So just a small turn counterclockwise. And there we are. Again, a little sharp, turning counterclockwise. I meant to say clockwise. A little bit more. So basically, what's happening is when you bring the saddles forward, you're making the scale length shorter, So it's making the tone higher, or the pitch higher. If you're making the scale length longer, so moving the saddles back, you're making it flatter. So now that this is a little sharp, I need to bring it just a little bit flat, or more toward flat. So quarter turn on the saddle there. And a good tip, whenever you're tuning your guitar, always tune a little past it. Rather bring it upwards. So when you're tuning it up, say that now I needed to bring it a little flat. So I brought it a little flat now. I would instead go a little properly off flat and then bring it up to the right pitch. That way your tension on the end of the string stays even. Just a little bit more. Once again, no surprise there. That is the G that's giving a little bit of trouble. The G is notoriously bad for not really getting in tune. Wow. I need to bring the action up a hair. Get those fretting out. What I am noticing, which is really nice, is that with the previous plastic nut, the strings were sticking a lot more, and now it feels like they're moving a lot better. All right, so let's see if it made any difference playability-wise. I had to check what riffs I played, because I can't remember. So, first off, we're going to go through the clean channels. Middle position. And the neck position. It's not my strongest playing today, I admit. But basically, future chug machine, here we go. Yeah, it's not too bad. Let's try the articulate lead. And I'm gonna suck at it, but let's do it anyway. So on the neck pickup, well, that was that. And I've kind of run out of things to play because, yeah, well, I'm not a guitar player in the slightest. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what I'm playing. Anywho, that was fun. Got this all fixed up, and now it's playing very well in somebody else's capable hands. I am not a guitar player by any means, so yeah, my playing also is to that end. But this fixed up pretty nice, which was the main point in the first place. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Click like down below, comment as well. If you have something to comment on, be kind toward my playing. I'm not a guitar player. I have said that abundantly, many, many times, especially today. It's a Monday that I'm filming this, so I'm a bit tired, and it's really hot in this room, so a bit sweaty too. So before my hands start sweating, I'm gonna stop playing as well because I don't want to muck up all my hard work. So, subscribe to see more and hit the bell. It helps out a hell of a lot. So, see ya, guys. Bye.